I never envisioned myself as the woman who betrays another. Yet, here I stand, revealing my deepest truth. My name is Sadia, and I have always held loyalty, morality, and the sanctity of marriage in high regard. Growing up in a conservative Muslim household in Morocco, the distinctions between right and wrong were clearly defined. However, life has a cruel way of obscuring those boundaries, and I transformed into someone I no longer recognize. It all started when I relocated to a new city, taking a job as a nanny for a wealthy couple, Chudu and Samina. Their son, Zain, was just 3, a bright-eyed child brimming with energy. I reassured myself that this was merely a job, a way to send money back home. Nothing more. But the moment I entered their home, I felt an overwhelming emptiness. Chudu and Samina resided in a magnificent villa, sleek and modern, with glass walls that allowed too much silence to seep in. It was a house filled with everything except joy. Samina, a 32-year-old corporate executive, was perpetually busy, leaving early and returning late. Her presence was only marked by the lingering scent of expensive perfume. She was beautiful and accomplished, yet somehow emotionally distant, even from her own son. Chudu, her husband, was different. In his mid-30s, he was attentive and engaged, making time for Zayn, sitting on the floor to build towers of blocks, his laughter filling the void left by Samina's absence. He noticed things that others overlooked, including me. Initially, it was innocent. A polite, "Good morning, Sadia," as he sipped his coffee. A casual, "You must be worn out. Zayn is quite a handful," as he took his son from my arms after a long day. But then it shifted. It was in the subtle details, the way his gaze lingered a moment longer than necessary, the way he listened to me as if my words held significance. He truly saw me in a way no man had before, and I saw him. One evening, after Samina departed for another business trip, I found Chudu sitting alone in the dimly lit living room. His suit jacket was draped over the arm of the couch, his tie loosened. He appeared weary, not from work, but from something deeper. "Rough day?" I asked, hesitant, unsure if I had overstepped. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "More like a rough life. I should have walked away. I should have said nothing. But instead, I took a seat across from him, folding my hands in my lap. Do you want to talk about it?" And he did. He spoke of a marriage that had devolved into a business arrangement, a wife who barely acknowledged him, a home that felt more like a luxury hotel where he was just another guest. "Sometimes I wonder if my wife even sees me anymore," he admitted, his voice tinged with quiet sorrow. I shouldn't have cared. It wasn't my place, but something about his loneliness resonated with my own. I had spent years avoiding men, guarding my heart, yet here I was, feeling something I had no right to feel. The first time I recognized the danger was when our hands accidentally touched. It was late, and Zayn had fallen asleep in my arms. As I passed him to Chudu, our fingers brushed. A simple touch, a fleeting moment, but it lingered. I quickly pulled away, my heart racing in my chest. Did he feel it too? Days went by, and I convinced myself I was imagining things. Chudu was simply being kind, nothing more. I buried my feelings, drowning them in work and prayer. But the more I tried to suppress them, the stronger they became. One night, while preparing Zane's milk in the kitchen, I sensed a presence behind me. I turned to find Chudu standing there, watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "You take such good care of him," he murmured. "You have such a kind heart, Sadia." Something in his voice sent shivers down my spine. I looked away, gripping the counter. "It's my job." "No," he said softly. "It's more than that." I should have walked away. I should have reminded him, and myself, that I was merely the nanny, that he was a married man, that this was wrong. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, frozen between temptation and fear, knowing that a single step forward would lead to a path I could never return from. Yet, I couldn't move. The line between right and wrong had already begun to blur. I should have stopped that night. I should have reminded myself who I was and what I stood for. But the truth was, I didn't want to stop. I convinced myself that what I felt for Chudu was harmless, that I was only drawn to him because he was kind, because he noticed me in a way no one else had. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was a slow, dangerous pull, one I was too weak to resist. In the days that followed, the atmosphere between us shifted. It wasn't in words, but in silences, in stolen glances that lingered too long. Every moment felt charged with something unspoken. I found myself anticipating his presence, cherishing the brief interactions we shared when Samina was away, or too preoccupied to notice. I despised myself for it, but it didn't deter me. Then it happened. One evening, after putting Zayn to bed, I walked into the kitchen to find Chudu there, his sleeves rolled up, a glass of water in his hand. He looked at me in a way that sent a shiver down my spine. "You're always taking care of everyone," he murmured, observing me. "Who takes care of you?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came because no one ever had before. Before I could think, he reached forward, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. I should have pulled away, should have stepped back, but I didn't. The touch lingered, his fingers warm against my skin. The distance between us shrank, our breaths mingling. I felt his hesitation, his silent question, and then he kissed me. It was soft, tentative, as if he was afraid of breaking me. But the moment our lips met, a fire ignited inside me, burning away every doubt, every warning my conscience screamed at me. When we pulled apart, guilt crashed over me like a wave. "This is wrong," I whispered, my hands trembling. Chudu exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I know," he replied, but he didn't apologize. He didn't step away. Instead, his eyes searched mine, looking for something. Permission, reassurance, an excuse. I gave him one because when he kissed me again, I didn't stop him. That night, something inside me shattered. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The affair began from that moment on, and everything changed. We were careful, always careful. We stole moments in the quiet of the house when Samina was working late, when Zayn was asleep, when the world felt like it belonged only to us. Every touch, every whispered word was a betrayal, yet I couldn't stop. I told myself it wasn't just lust, that what we had was something deeper. He needed me. I needed him. But no matter how much I tried to justify it, the guilt never left me. I prayed more, begging for forgiveness even as I continued to sin. I told myself I would end it, that I would leave before it went too far. But it already had. One afternoon, as I was tidying the living room, Chudu walked in, phone in hand, his face tense. "Samina is extending her trip again." I didn't respond, but he looked at me with something dark in his eyes. "You know what that means, don't you?" I did. Later that night, we met in the shadows of the house where no one could see us. His lips found mine, urgent, desperate, as if trying to make up for all the moments we'd spent apart. I melted into him, ignoring the voice in my head that told me this wasn't love, it was destruction. The guilt began to creep in, but the thing about stolen moments is that they are fleeting. With every kiss, every embrace, the weight of our betrayal grew heavier. I started avoiding Samina. I couldn't look her in the eyes without feeling like a fraud. One morning, as I prepared breakfast, she sighed, rubbing her temples. "Chudu's been distant lately," she muttered, more to herself than to me. Do you think something's wrong? My hands froze around the spoon I was holding, my heart pounding so loudly I thought she could hear it. I'm sure he's just busy, I lied, forcing my voice to stay even. She nodded but didn't seem convinced. For the first time, I saw it, the doubt creeping into her mind. That night, when Chudu pulled me into his arms, I felt cold inside. We were playing with fire, and I was beginning to realize that neither of us would escape unscathed. The silence that followed was suffocating. I had known deep down that this could never last, but nothing prepared me for how quickly the walls of my life began to crumble. It started subtly. Samina's suspicions grew. She was a woman who never missed details. I should have been more careful, but with every stolen moment, every stolen kiss, I had let my guard down. One afternoon, as I arranged Zane's toys, Samina stood by the door, watching me. Her gaze was sharp, too knowing, though she said nothing. It was as though she was waiting for me to crack, to confess the truth that hung thick in the air. Sadia, she began, her voice cold. You've been distant lately. Are you all right? I turned to face her, the question hanging between us. I wanted to lie, to tell her everything was fine, but I couldn't. The weight of my guilt pressed down on me, crushing my ability to speak. I managed a weak smile. Just tired, Samina. It's been a long week. She didn't respond, but her eyes lingered, probing me in a way that felt like a secret accusation. I felt exposed, caught between a woman I had come to care for and the man who had stolen my heart.
The breaking point came when Chudu, for the first time, pulled away. He had been distant for days, and I couldn't understand why he stopped seeking me out for those secret meetings, those moments in the quiet corners of their home. The longing in his eyes had faded into something colder, something regretful. We need to talk, he said one night. His voice strained as he sat across from me in the dimly lit living room. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I had been expecting this, hoping for it, but I wasn't ready. His gaze was hard, distant, as if the man I had known was slipping away. What happened? I whispered, my voice trembling. Chudu looked down at his hands, his fingers flexing as if they were incapable of grasping the words. I never should have done this, he muttered. It was a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you, Sadia, but I'm married, I have a family. I can't. His words were a dagger, each syllable sharper than the last. The truth hit me like a wave crashing over me. In that moment, I realized I was nothing more than a fleeting escape for him, something to fill the void that Samina's absence had created. I was never going to be more. I felt my world unravel as I sat there, stunned and speechless. I understand, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Chudu looked at me, guilt written all over his face, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. We could never go back to who we had been before. It wasn't long after that when I knew I had to leave. I had to leave before I lost everything, before I lost my soul, my faith, my dignity. I had betrayed the very principles I had lived by, and now there was no way back. I wrote the letter in the quiet of the night when everyone was asleep. My hand trembled as I penned each word, knowing that this was the end. I didn't tell Samina the truth. What good would it do? She didn't need to know. Instead, I simply wrote that I was leaving, that it was time for me to go. When I left the letter on the kitchen counter, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over, but the price I had paid for this freedom was far higher than I could have ever imagined. The next morning, I packed my things quietly, leaving behind the life I had known for months. I left Zane, the boy I had come to love like my own. I left Chudu, whose face I would never forget. And I left Samina, who would never understand what had truly happened. As I walked out the door, the weight of everything I had lost crushed me. I had betrayed them both, and for what? A fleeting moment of passion, a few stolen hours of what I had convinced myself was love. Days later, I found myself sitting alone in my small apartment, staring at the walls that seemed to close in around me. I was empty. The affair, the lies, the guilt. They had hollowed me out. I took a deep breath, trying to find something to hold on to, but there was nothing. Not anymore. And that's when I realized something I hadn't been willing to admit before. Infidelity is not love. It is a lie. A hollow, empty lie that only brings destruction. I had tried to tell myself I was just a victim, that Chudu had seduced me, that I had no choice. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had chosen this. I had made the decision to betray not just a marriage, but my own values, my own identity. I can never undo what I've done, I whispered to myself, staring at the blank walls, the guilt settling into every fiber of my being. But I can never forget Sadia's reflection. I never anticipated finding myself in this situation, grappling with the repercussions of my choices. The burden of my actions weighed heavily on my chest, a constant reminder of the betrayal I had committed. I had once been a woman of principles, valuing loyalty and integrity above all else. Yet, here I was, a mere shadow of my former self, haunted by the memories of what I had lost. As days turned into weeks, the silence of my apartment echoed the emptiness within me. I attempted to fill the void with distractions, books, television, even occasional outings, but nothing could erase the guilt that clung to me like a second skin. I often found myself gazing out the window, watching life unfold outside, feeling like a ghost in my own existence. Zane's laughter, once a source of joy, now felt like a distant echo. I missed the innocence of his smile, the way he would rush into my arms, his tiny hands wrapping around my neck. I had left him behind, and the thought gnawed at my heart. I had betrayed not just Chudu and Samina, but the bond I had formed with that sweet child. Chudu's face haunted my dreams. I could still feel the warmth of his touch, the intensity of his gaze. I remembered how he made me feel seen, valued, cherished. But those moments were tainted now, overshadowed by the reality of our affair. I had allowed myself to believe in a fantasy, a fleeting escape from the loneliness that had enveloped me. As I sat in my small apartment, I began to confront the truth I had been avoiding. I had not only betrayed a marriage, I had betrayed myself. I had compromised my values, my beliefs, and in doing so, I had lost a part of my soul. The woman I had been was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I sought solace in prayer, hoping to find forgiveness for my transgressions. I poured my heart out to God, pleading for guidance, for a way to heal the wounds I had inflicted on myself and others. I wanted to believe that redemption was possible, that I could rebuild my life and reclaim my identity. But the journey to healing was not straightforward. I had to confront the shame that lingered in the corners of my mind, the whispers of doubt that told me I was unworthy of love and forgiveness. I began to understand that healing would take time, that I needed to be patient with myself as I navigated this new reality. I started to focus on self-reflection, journaling my thoughts and feelings, trying to make sense of the chaos within me. I wrote about my upbringing, the values instilled in me, and how I had strayed so far from them. I explored the reasons behind my choices, the loneliness that had driven me into Chudu's arms, and the desperation that had clouded my judgment. Gradually, I began to piece together the fragments of my life. I sought out new friendships, connections built on honesty and trust. I immersed myself in my work, finding fulfillment in caring for others without the complications of romantic entanglements. I learned to appreciate the beauty of solitude, discovering strength in my independence. As the months passed, I found a sense of peace within myself. I realized that while I could not change the past, I could shape my future. I could choose to live a life aligned with my values, to honor the lessons I had learned through my mistakes. I began to embrace the idea of forgiveness, not just from others, but for myself. In time, I learned to let go of the guilt that had weighed me down. I understood that I was not defined by my past, but by the choices I made moving forward. I could rebuild my life, one step at a time, and in doing so, reclaim the woman I had once been. I still think of Zane, of Chudu, and of Samina. I hope they have found happiness, that they have healed from the wounds I inflicted. I carry their memories with me, a reminder of the fragility of love and the importance of integrity. And as I look to the future, I do so with hope. I am determined to live a life of authenticity, to honor the values that once guided me, and to embrace the journey of self-discovery that lies ahead. I may never forget the pain of my past, but I will not allow it to define me. Instead, I will use it as a catalyst for growth, a reminder of the strength that lies within me. With each passing day, I felt the burden of my past lifting, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. I began volunteering at a local community center, working with children who, like Zane, needed guidance and care. In their laughter, I found healing. In their innocence, I rediscovered joy. I also sought therapy, a safe space to unpack